In Venezuela, intellectuals of the world paid tribute on Friday to the late commander Hugo Chavez. German public transport workers began a one-day strike to increase pressure on the government in an ongoing wage dispute. Namibia and Venezuela strengthened bilateral relations in several services, industry, and economic sectors. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Venezuela, intellectuals of the world paid tribute on Friday to the late commander Hugo Chavez, 2 days before the 10-year anniversary of his physical departure. The Venezuelan Minister of Culture, Ernesto Villegas, announced that revolutionary thinkers and activists from around the world arrived in Caracas to participate in a global forum for the relevance of the Bolivarian ideas of Commander Hugo Chavez. The forum will address topics such as popular power, the importance of communes, the civil-military union, and decolonization. Participants also reflect on the role of the media and new technologies, the international situation, and the union and integration of Latin America and the Caribbean and the planet in the construction of a multipolar and multicentric world in the road towards the socialism of the 21st century. Among those who will participate are the former Minister of Culture of Cuba, Abel Prieto, the Argentinian political scientist Atilio Boron, the Venezuelan anthropologist and filmmaker Sergio Arria, and the Puerto Rican sociologist Ramon Grossfokel. As we were saying, intellectuals, activists, political leaders, and representatives of social movements gather in Caracas, Venezuela, to take part in the global forum for the relevance of the Bolivarian ideas of Commander Hugo Chavez in the 21st century. To give us her insights on this event, we now welcome Claudia de la Cruz, coordinator of the movements of the Bolivarian Alliance of the People of Our America. Hello, Claudia.
Hi, how are you?
We are good. Claudia, first of all, can you give us details about the activities and how the forum goes on?
I mean, it's been really great to be welcomed by the Bolivarian Revolution and the Venezuelan comrades. The meeting's going really well. This morning we had a lot of conversations around the comunas and just the way in which the community organizes itself. And we talked a lot about the spirit of Hugo Chavez and what he has meant, not only for the Venezuelan people, but internationally as well. And so it's been really great and re-energizing to be in this space.
This forum takes place in a very complex economic and political context marked by international conflicts, inflation, the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, and a revival of the Monroe Doctrine. How can social movements counter imperial ambitions?
I mean, I think it's really important, first of all, to make sure that we identify where the war is coming from. Obviously, the war is something that has been designed by the Pentagon and the White House. It has a center in the United States of America. And so, you know, the U.S., we were just having this conversation around the union, the civic and military union that has been able to strengthen Venezuela as a nation. And in that same vein, I think it's important to acknowledge that, you know, the threat of imperialism, the threat of the United States as one of the most powerful countries in the world, if not the most powerful country in the world, is not something that only affects, you know, Venezuela as a nation. It affects the whole world, and we need to be able to identify that our common enemy, both within the United States and outside of the United States, is U.S. capitalism and imperialism. And so I think that that's the first thing to acknowledge. I think that the best way for us to be able to fight against imperialism is building working class internationalism, which was one of the biggest elements and one of the biggest lessons that Hugo Chavez taught us. And so I think, you know, in this context, we are embracing, uplifting that working class internationalism, that popular diplomacy that he talked so much about and that he actually worked in building in practice. So it's been really great to be here and to think through, again, an anti-imperialist lens, identifying the building of internationalism as the core way of fighting back.
On that note, Claudia, Latin America is seeing major changes with Gustavo Petro leading Colombia to a new future, Lula's return to power, and the far right showing its true colors. How is this integrationist will of Chavez present today in this new political landscape in the region?
I mean, it's the living legacy, again, of Hugo Chavez. He spoke a lot to integration. He created mechanisms like ALBA, not only ALBA movements, but also ALBA TCP, Mercosur, and all these different instruments that gathered all these progressive governments to talk about, again, how to build outside of the capitalist and imperialist logic of the United States and how to fortify not only themselves as nation states, but the continent. This question of collaboration, the question of building unity on the principles of, defense of human life, defense of the planet. Those are things that, again, Hugo Chavez had in the very essence of his politics, and it's something that will continue to help us build a stronger continent and a stronger world in the face of the unipolarity that the United States promotes. We're talking about multipolarity. We're talking about a socialist future. We're talking about a future that is able to guarantee the living conditions of all human beings. And so the changes that are happening in Latin America right now are really hopeful ones. But we still have to, as social movements, continue to make the push to build stronger. And we also have to, as social movements, take on the banners of defense of those projects.
Thank you, Claudia, for your insights and your time here in teleSUR English.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
It was our pleasure. We thank Claudia de la Cruz, activist and coordinator of ALBA TCP movements. Also on Friday, Russian Federation's Foreign Affairs Minister, Sergei Lavrov, evoked the historical figure of Commander Hugo Chavez, the leader of the Bolivarian Revolution, whose death anniversary Venezuelans will remember next Sunday, March 5th.
Сегодня мы отдаем дань памяти Hugo Chavesa. Он ушел из жизни 10 лет назад, оставив глубокий след не только в истории своей страны, своего народа, в истории латиноамериканского континента, но и в истории мирового сообщества. Это была харизматичная личность, последовательный сторонник равноправия в международных делах. Hugo Chavez неоднократно занимал твердую позицию в своих публичных выступлениях, в деятельности на международной арене в пользу необходимости уважения принципов Устава ООН, в пользу недопустимости подчинения одних стран диктату и монополии других. Мы хорошо помним, как он выступал в Организации Объединенных Наций, с какой пламенной страстью он излагал свои мысли и как широко его принимали даже те, кто не соглашался с ним, даже противники Hugo Chavesa признавали масштаб его личности. И я убежден, что он заложил один из важнейших камней в фундамент латиноамериканской солидарности, который проявляется сейчас и в деятельности сообщества латиноамериканских и карибских государств, и который проявляется в инициативе его преемника, президента Николаса Мадуро, который призвал Латинскую Америку и страны Карибского бассейна выступать сплоченно на международной арене в русле концепции, которую он назвал «Большая Родина». Hugo Chavez неоднократно бывал в Российской Федерации. Он был близким и очень добрым другом нашей страны. Помимо личных отношений с президентом Путиным, он вызывал огромную симпатию среди всех наших граждан. И память о нем, конечно же, мы будем хранить всегда. Я несколько раз имел честь общаться с Hugo Chavez'ом и подтверждаю, что впечатления от контактов с этим человеком действительно оставляют очень глубокое впечатление от тех устоев, тех принципов, которые он продвигал всю свою жизнь на международной арене, оставаясь при этом земным человеком, гражданином своей страны и гражданином Латинской Америки, объединению которой и отстаиванию интересов которой он отдал так много сил. Мы всегда будем помнить об Hugo Chavez.
Let us take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account of teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. German public transport workers began a one-day strike on Friday to increase pressure on the government in an ongoing wage dispute. Authorities in the country warned passengers to prepare for significantly disrupted travel in major cities, including Cologne, Frankfurt, Stuttgart, and Munich. According to protest organizers, bus, streetcar, and subway drivers in 6 federal states will join the strike, which also aims to draw attention to climate change and the need to strengthen public transportation. Public sector employees staged strikes in several federal states since last week after the second round of collective bargaining with the government ended without an agreement. The union, which represents around 2,500,000 public sector members, is demanding a wage increase of 10.5% and no less than €500 amid galloping inflation, which worsens the cost of living crisis. On Friday, a coalition of French labor unions, opposition political parties, and activist groups called for nationwide general strikes and protests on March 7th. The decision is a part of a campaign denouncing the government's proposed pension reforms that would raise the retirement age. It will be the 6th nationwide multi-sector strike since the current campaign started on January 19th. On Friday, leaders of the major labor unions in the European country took part in an inter-union meeting. The event was presented as a show of unity against the attempt by Emmanuel Macron's government to increase the retirement age. During the meeting, the General Secretary of the General Confederation of Labor, Philippe Martinez, highlighted the importance of getting as many workers as possible to join the protests.
We want the generalization of strikes, not the general strike, because the generalization of strikes, it seems quite clear to me, is that everyone should act everywhere. It is not a leaflet, even with the most beautiful writing calling for a general strike, that will make people go on a strike.
Demonstrators gathered in Athens on Friday to protest against a deadly rail crash which killed at least 57 people. Protesters carried a black piece of cloth as a sign of mourning and wrote messages in red paint on the pavement and windows of nearby buildings. Demonstrators also held up white balloons for the victims, blocking traffic in the center of the capital. Recovery teams spent a third day scouring the wreckage in Tempe, nearly 400 kilometers north of Athens, where a passenger train slammed into a freight carrier just before on Tuesday. The train from Athens to Thessaloniki was carrying 350 passengers, many of them students returning from carnival celebrations. Italy's Coast Guard reported on Friday they rescued 211 asylum seekers off the island of Lampedusa, saving them from a ship that was struggling in rough seas. According to a statement issued by the Coast Guard, the migrants were intercepted about 28 kilometers south of Lampedusa as they traveled on a fishing boat that was beginning to flood. The report added that one of the rescued was handed over to the police on suspicion of being a human trafficker. This event follows Sunday's shipwreck of the Calabria region in southern Italy, in which at least 68 asylum seekers died and several remain missing. The Italian prosecutor's office is investigating the incident amid controversy over whether the Coast Guard and police could have done more to prevent the tragedy. On Friday, a ship carrying humanitarian aid provided by the Romanian government and Syrian diaspora in Romania arrived in Syria, amounting as the first aid cargo from Europe to arrive in Syria after the February 6 earthquake. The ship docked at the port of Tartus, containing food items, clothes, shoes, blankets, and requirements for children. The deputy head of the executive office in Tartus, Governorate, welcomed the aid and noted that it's the first time a ship carrying aid has come to Syria from European ports. On February 14th, Romania sent a plane with aid cargo through the Romanian Shelter Capacity Initiative. teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat, dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The Foreign Minister of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Ivan Hill, had a meeting with the Deputy Minister of Mines and Energy of the Republic of Namibia, Cornelia Shilunga, aimed at strengthening bilateral relations between both nations. The meeting also served as an opportunity to exchange shared cooperation commitments. The diplomatic event took place from March 2nd to the 3rd on the sidelines of the inaugural session of the Namibia-Venezuela Joint Cooperation Commission held in the capital, Windhoek. The session also hosted a meeting of senior government officials from both nations. Venezuela and Namibia established diplomatic relations on May 22, 1990, and since then have signed 8 cooperation agreements in strategic sectors in areas such as education, culture, communications, agriculture, trade, industry, mining, and electoral processes. Angolan President João Lourenço received his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron at the presidential palace. The two heads of state are expected to conclude a partnership agreement aimed at developing the agriculture and agri-food sector in Angola. The French head of state began a tour of Central African nations on Wednesday in an attempt to test a new relationship with the continent, as anti-French sentiment runs high in some former colonies. Macron's trip began in Gabon on Wednesday to later head to Angola, Congo, Brazzaville, and the neighboring Democratic Republic of the Congo. Nigeria's Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi will mount a legal challenge against the election of a new president-elect, Bola Tinubu. At a news conference in the capital, third-place Labour Party candidate Peter Obi said that the election would be remembered as one of the most controversial in Nigeria's history, and that it was marred by irregularities. Hours later, second-place candidate Atiku Abubakar with the People's Democratic Party also rejected defeat and said he was consulting with his lawyers on how to challenge the outcome. So far, at least 4 other parties joined the candidates in challenging the results. They have 3 weeks from the day the final tally was announced to appeal. South Korean Joint Chief of Staff Lee Sung-jun announced on Friday a large-scale joint military drill with the United States dubbed Freedom Shield from March 13th to the 23rd.
The drill will run for 11 days, March 13th through the 23rd, and is being designed to strengthen the joint defense response capability of South Korea with the United States.
The Freedom Shield military drill will be held despite opposition from Pyongyang, which considers such maneuvers as a rehearsal for an invasion of its territory.
Freedom Shield has been designed to strengthen our alliance's defense response capabilities in the face of possible shifting security scenarios and aggression by North Korea. It will also include lessons learned from recent wars and conflicts.
In Malaysia, at least 3 people have died and more than 30,000 have been evacuated due to floods in the south of the peninsula, where heavy rains continue. On Friday, Malaysia's National Disaster Management Agency reported Johor in the south of the country as the most affected state, with more than 31,850 evacuees, who are in 209 temporary shelters. So far, 3 people have been reported dead: an elderly couple found trapped in their flooded home on Thursday and a man who was swept away by a current on Wednesday. Malaysia's meteorological experts forecast heavy rainfall to continue on Friday night through Saturday in Johor and also in some areas of Pahang. Contained an oil spill after the sinking of a tanker in the oriental Mindoro region. The tanker MT Princess Empress was carrying 800,000 liters of industrialized fuel oil when it sank off the northeast coast of Mindoro Island on February 28th. The Philippine Coast Guard confirmed that the oil spill had spread over an area of more than 24 square kilometers, as tests on water samples have showed that part of the industrial fuel oil being carried on the tanker leaked into the sea. Initially, the Philippines Coast Guard had said that the fuel spill belonged to the diesel in the engines of the stricken ship and not to its cargo due to poor sailing conditions during the voyage. The Princess Empress drifted into the waters off Cape Balingawan, Mindoro Island, where it became half submerged. The 20 crew members on board were rescued by another vessel and, according to the Coast Guard, are in good physical condition. Authorities in Brazil announced that deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon set a new record in February of a total of 291 square kilometers, highest record for the month in the entire historical series. Preliminary data from the National Institute for Spatial Research on February showed 209 square kilometers of forest destroyed in the Brazilian part of the world's largest tropical rainforest. In view of the warning signs, the Executive Secretary of the Climate Observatory, Marcio Astrini, believed that the current administration of President Luis Ignacio da Silva took the right measures against deforestation, but the work of rebuilding, putting the house in order, is slower, more difficult than the destruction of the previous government of defeated President Jair Bolsonaro. We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.